Hi everyone, and welcome back to our second panel of the day. So today's panel is titled Art as a Basis for Community Building, What About Peer-to-Peer? For those of you that have just walked in or who maybe weren't here for the first panel, these panels are part of Permission to Try, which is a European project between Club 707, Backhouse Projects and Jumpstart Art. I'm looking at each of you to check that I got that correct. My name is Sophie Mak-Schram and I'll be your moderator today. One thing that I like to say quite early on is there is space for questions. So as you're listening along, please start thinking about what you would like to ask our speakers, because a large part of this panel is really oriented, and all of these panels is oriented around what is it that you want to learn or engage from the people speaking on stage. So do think along and we'll have space for your questions. So a little bit around what this panel specifically is about. So we're focusing here on the connective potential of art. So its capacity to engage audiences in learning or foster dialogue with peers or function as a means of communication. So we'll be thinking about different settings, such as the university, such as the studio or the exhibition, and thinking about what forms of learning are facilitated and what kinds of connection or communication are supported through the means of art. And of course, learning, community, and communication are really broad terms. And so we won't be discussing, or we won't necessarily be tracing the discursive history of what community means or what learning means. But we will hopefully be hearing from the speakers on how they understand those terms to be operating in their practice, and perhaps the specificities of what they do and don't mean when we're using these terms together. So I'll leave that space up for you three when you speak. And I'm just kind of giving you a heads up here that obviously there's a risk here that we reduce each other to unidentified groups if we talk about communities too broadly. So hopefully what we'll hear from is quite concrete examples and really specific relationships or forms of understanding that each of our panelists have today. In terms of who we have on the panel today, we've got Edward Clydesdale Thomson, who is head of fine art in Arnhem, where he leads the bachelor program and shapes the conditions for artistic production. And this involves both supporting emerging artists in their professional development and fostering an environment to encourage experimentation, critical inquiry, and dialogue between making and thinking. In his wider practice, he describes himself as always searching. I will perhaps let you fill in a little bit more on that if you like when you speak, and focuses on the process of exploring and learning. So hopefully we'll hear a bit around learning and what it means to you when you speak. And we've also got Esther Kokmeijer, who is here on behalf of Het Wilde Weten. Esther has been part of Het Wilde Weten with some breaks since 2005. And in Esther's own practice, she's an artist and explorer who focuses on the global commons, particularly through considering our relationship to water. And she worked as an expedition photographer and polar guide in the Arctic and Antarctica and for over 10 years, and is the founder of Antarcticos, which is an annual printed journal dedicated to Antarctica. And finally, we have Nanda Janssen on the panel with us today, who is a curator and arts professional based between Paris and the Netherlands and working internationally. And she currently serves on the acquisitions committee of FRAC Alsace 2024-2026, and has most recently curated I Hit You With a Flower, Sugared Art with a Bite at Stedelijk Museum Schiedam between 2024-2025, as well as many other exhibitions and committees which might be relevant for you to point towards when you speak. So thank you all for joining us. What we'll do is similar to the previous panel. I'll pass the mic around and ask you to perhaps start by telling us a little bit around the ways that you think about learning in terms of the practice that you have. Sorry, you can have your own mics.
Can you hear me? Great. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. So, yeah, I'm an artist, but I also work in education, and I also have a foundation, which is also a space of learning, let's say. And within that foundation, we run a project which is a residency space. So there are kind of multiple levels at which we work with as artists, with artists, within a space of learning and learning together. I'm going to talk mostly about what we do at Bear here today, because that was what I was invited to do. But if there are questions about the other things, I can talk about that too. So, you know, as an when you're training young adults to become an artist, our program develops, or we try to develop the skills that artists are going to need to be able to step outside and step into something of the ecosystem that we just heard about in the previous panel. And as you could see from that, there's not one path to become an artist. There are a multitude of different routes. So we're not trying to teach people to be able to do one of these different routes, but we're trying to give various skills in which that they can then be able to function and be able to find that route for themselves. What does this mean in practice, and how does that relate to community, I think is what you want me to talk about here. And let's start maybe with what are the exit qualifications that you have as an artist when you leave a BA in the Netherlands, because the qualifications are set at the national level. And one of the things that you're asked to be able to do is to work together, to collaborate. This is in the assessment criteria that are given at a national level. And each program is then responsible for finding a way to understand what that means specifically in the program that you have. And what does working together entail? That again is not uniform. There are many ways what that could mean, from collaborating with another artist to going into a social context or a political context. But what this criteria is trying to look towards, I think this is what's the importance of it, is that art is something that is inherently not outside of the world, but is inside of the world. So it's a criteria that it's about art as a tool through which you can work together with other people. Now, we have the criteria that go across all the different courses that we have. And there are a few moments that are really specifically focusing on this. From a structural perspective, we learn in a multi-year learning group within Bear. So there is a group of about 20 young artists working together under the guidance of a tutor within a tutor base. So this is a multi-year learning space. And the intention behind that is that they work together in a shared studio environment and they can support each other in that learning. So from the outset, let's say the structural conditions are put in place to allow communication. But then you cannot guarantee that there will always be communication. And there are a lot of divisions and there are a lot of curtains that could put up. And there is a tendency, because people like to also have their own space and their own space. So we also have elements that are more programmatic, that are related to how do you collaborate, how do you work with others. And these come in the projects that we do. We have projects where we invite artists specifically working in all different kinds of collaborative forms within the way they work. And we ask our students to step into those practices and work with those artists. And during these projects, they have the opportunity to learn practical skills about what does it mean to perhaps work on a community project. What does it mean to collaborate together and create a mural together? What does it mean to do various forms of working together? So on a structural level, on a programmatic level, but also on a kind of a component level, there are elements that focus on how or trying to impart the skills so that when a graduate steps out, that they are able to work with others, that they are able to find find a resonance for what they're doing within a wider society. And we have a program which is literally called How to Connect, and that is our, let's say, professionalization program within the course, and we like to think of it more of a like a lexicon rather than an imperative. So it's, in the sense, it's more of a question. So it's really in that program, it starts in the first year, and in the first year, in the first year the students are brought around a whole host of different art spaces. It's more like a survey, let's say. So they visit artist initiatives, they visit commercial galleries, they visit museums, they visit contemporary art centres, they visit collections, and it's more of a kind of opening the door. This is the art world. You're also welcome here. And it builds over the years towards a moment in the fourth year where the students have to do a project outside together as a group, collaborating with a particular institution, and they have to develop the links to that institution. So they have to work in a collaborative way, but also within a professional environment that is actually the environment that they're going to be stepping into. And not all practices suit all types of venues, or I don't necessarily believe that, actually. I think all practices do suit all different venues. They just need to be, the conditions need to be shaped and determined by the artist. And I think this is one of our responsibilities as artists, and it's something that I certainly take very seriously, is that we have to be a part of shaping the conditions that we're working in, and we shouldn't just be responding to them. And this is something we also try to impart in the students, especially through this How to Connect course. So it's about how do you collaborate together in doing something whereby also the conditions that allow your artwork to speak are in place.
Great, thank you so much, Edward. Should we move straight on to Esther?
Yeah. I first will make a description of het Wilde Weten. So we are an artist-run space of 15 studios, 17 artists. And all the artists are from very different media, different age, different background of cultures. Besides the studios, we also have a project space, slightly smaller than this project space, but almost similar. And as a group, we kind of, how it works is that we pay the rent for this project space together. And we use it for multiple purposes, as of course exhibitions, but we also have a residency. So sometimes the resident artist can use it and has an exhibition, or we as artists can also use it for trying things out, or if we have to make big works. But also we organize book markets, or you can rent it. So it has a multifunctional way of use. And as I said, we have also a residency. This place is the only part in the building where it is allowed that people can stay over. So it is, in a way, an interesting residency because you are alone in this monastery. It's a former monastery. So some artists find it interesting. And actually, Edward has been one of our residencies. And also, Edward has been part of het Wilde Weten. So he knows the place very well. It's in the city center of Rotterdam. It's opposite of the cathedral. So some of you live here and might know that place. It's built around in the beginning of 1900. as a monastery, and then the nuns were living in the part that we have as a studio space, and then both sides there was a school. So for us as artists, I think we just had a meeting 2 days ago about how do we continue. For us, I think the residency space, for all of us, is very important. So all of us, we want to keep that. But for example, the project space is keeping on the agenda. Like, can we maintain this? Because the atmosphere financially for artists citywide is changing as well. So you already said I'm there from 2005, and so that's, I think, 8 years in between. I haven't been there, but so I've been in total maybe 14 years in het Wilde Weten. But every year is completely different. Some years it's quite silent. People are more behind their doors, working on their works. So it is kind of reinventing the whole time what's going on, what artists are there, how much energy they have. But there has been former times, that we got subsidized by the government, by the Rotterdam government city council, thanks. And then, so it was way more easy to have a public program. So there has been times that we had every month 1 or 2 events. So for me, having been there for a long period, it's kind of also interesting to see how we reinvent and have to find a balance the whole time of what the possibilities are and how we collaborate together, because we are a collaboration, but all of us are very individual practices. So there is not, the collaboration is running that space in a way. So everything is run by the artist, and it's kind of work of love. So even the residents, so we take turns of who's taking care of the residents and showing them around. But we organize a dinner and trying also to invite others who could be interesting for this resident. So there was a question. Can I do, or is it for later? Oh, you had a question? Is that
it's no good now, but I wanted to know how you select the artist.
Just for the sake of the recording, there's a question from the audience about how you select the artist.
Yeah. So we have an open call somewhere in the autumn. And then we have, mostly we have 4 spots of 3 months. And then, we get the applications back. There is a few things. Of course, we look at the character of the work. Does it fit here? Because the residency space is not so big in the studio. So sometimes people, they make big oil paintings, and it means you have to sleep in the same space where you paint. So that's not possible. So it's very practical. We try to put it also in the application form, but still. So we look at those things that we know that some artists will not fit at all. And we look at the artists that for us will also, where you feel a connection with for the practice. But we also look at where the artists are from. We try to invite a variety of artists from very different places. We get also lots of applications from artists, even from Rotterdam, because they don't have a studio. So it feels very sad to not invite them, but yeah, it is a space where you can sleep. So then we try to put them, maybe we give them an option to use the project space, or try to put them to other places. But so it's a very the selection is going over and over. It's a whole night with pizza and fun as well. This
Quality of the work.
yeah, of course, the quality, but also, I mean, what is quality? I mean, we are with a lot. So we are with a group of 17, and we are divided in some subgroups. So I'm part of the residency team as well, and we are with 5. So in a way, our 5 we are selecting, but everybody else from het Wilde Weten can also send in their preferences, and they are allowed to also be on the meeting. But mostly, that doesn't happen. And so of course the quality is important, but also because we invite them personally, we will be with them. So also if your artist practices with sound, it could be that you're really interested in that work from someone else which has sound. So it's not only quality, it's also that it does something, that you feel a connection. I think that is maybe even more important in this case, because it's a love work.
Maybe that's a nice point to stop on this question of connection, because Nanda, we'd love to hear also from you around the work that you do, which I know is much more in the realm of exhibition making.
Yeah, I've been listening so intensely to Edward and Esther that I forgot your initial question. Can you repeat it, please?
It was quite open-ended. It was about forms of learning in the work that you do. So the ways in which art plays a role in either creating learning or creating connection.
Okay. I think personally, I learn a lot from art, and maybe it's also a part of why I'm so interested in art, because there's so much to learn on an individual level. It's like reading a newspaper or watching a really good documentary, but through art. That's part of the fun for me. I'm in the arts because one of my mottos is I nicked it from Lawrence Weiner. It's called Art Makes You Think Under Your Position in the Sun. In other words, what am I doing here on this earth? What's my position? Who am I? And I think by looking at exhibitions, talking to artists, creating exhibitions, I learn a lot, really also very scholarly things, like basic primary school stuff, like where is this country? What's the capital? What are the issues of this culture? What's happening? Also, for example, an exhibition that from which I learn a lot is Documenta. Each 5 years, I love to go there because every time it's quite giving direction to what will be the issues in art and society for the next 5 years. Until now, each time it came true. For example, the edition of Adam Timczyk, I never know how to pronounce his name, of the Polish curator in 2017. That documentary presented a lot of artworks in which minorities played a pivotal role, spoke up. And now it's all over the place. Now it's quite normal. But back then it was like, okay, what's happening? And each country or region has its own particular minority, for example. So that was, that's what I learned from exhibitions. From my own exhibition that I do, I still keep it on my individual level, is like, for example, I made an exhibition by Bruno Penado, a French artist. It was a solo show. It's a long time ago, 2009 or 8. And he made very poppy sculptures. And he was very much inspired by the philosopher, the poet and writer Édouard Glissant from Martinique. I had never heard of him. And his idea of creolization. And that was quite an eye-opener. And I think this idea of creolization is still very valid today. He developed it in the 90s and further on, but it has not lost its actualiteit, for example. Or I made an exhibition with Wendy Morris, also a long time ago, in 2010. she's an artist from Zimbabwe. She lived large part of her life in South Africa, and in the 90s she moved to Belgium. So with one leg she's standing in Europe and with the other in Africa, and her work is exactly about that. She's making, at the time she made charcoal film, animation films and drawings about the history and the connection between those two continents. And the reason for that exhibition at the time was the World Cup of Soccer 2010 that was taking place in South Africa. And I thought, well, it's all nice, all this soccer, but let's focus on South Africa. What's the link to us here in the Netherlands? Well, of course, there's a large link through the history and the colonial history, the VOC. The Netherlands has left very dark, it's a dark history, and it's good to freshen this up in our memories. But what I also learned from this exhibition, for example, is that I never knew that South African, black South African men fought during the First World War in the armies of Europe. I never knew that. Now it's much more common to know, but at the time it was really an eye-opener for me, for example. Also, I learned in that exhibition that South African chiefs donated money to Belgium for the rebuilding of Belgium. Never knew that. And also laid bare a prejudice I had, my European tunnel vision, that you always think money goes from Europe to Africa, but no way. Like over 100 years ago, it also went the other way around. So it also, apart from facts, it also learns to open up your perspective, your position, to pinpoint your blind spots, what you don't know yet. So I feel I'm much more of an opener person, thanks to art, than I would have been without it. Well, that's not true, because I also love documentaries. But for me, it's really a way of recalibrating yourself as well. And can I talk about another example, or do it take in too much time?
Go for it.
Yeah. So recently, last year, I made an exhibition on the grounds of 3 monasteries or convents in Brabant for a biennale, the Holy Triangle Biennale. And my objective was that it would be really supported by the brothers and sisters that live there, because they open up their terrain, their domains. Normally they're very private. And I really wanted that they backed up the exhibition. I thought, if they don't back it up, everyone feels it, it's not connected. What's the point of making an exhibition here? So what I did is, I became a better curator. So each month I stayed there over a week, and I followed their rhythm, their daily rhythm. So to get up, I have to admit, I didn't go to all the masses, but I followed their routine. I met a lot of people, from the gardener to all the volunteers, and I got to know the brothers and sisters much better, because I wasn't the curator back there in Paris behind the desk, but I was the curator that was all the time among them, that frequented their masses, had their suppers. So I became much more accessible. And almost each month, we also had a meeting with all the 3 convents together. So not one-on-one, but all together. Because I noticed they were a bit frightened of contemporary art. And I thought, oh, whoa, this is not good. We're doing a contemporary art exhibition here. And I thought, well, I hope to share with them my vision of what art can mean also in their homes. So this was a very interesting exchange, where both of the parties, both me as well as the brothers and sisters, could lose something. Because I thought honestly, their view on art, I thought it was quite terrible. It was really old-fashioned. And of course, they thought what I thought to be art was no art, maybe. I don't know what they thought. But this was really interesting. So each month I presented a few artists. So normally where you might select all of the artists at once and present them and start to invite them, I now did that bit by bit. So I thought of 3 or 4, I presented them, we had a discussion, I prepared some questions to them, also about how it linked to their world, their life. And this worked really well. So we really had talks about, for example, what is the meaning of food in your daily life? Or I was planning to invite an artist to make a monumental star, and I wanted them I wanted to know from them, what is the role of hemellichamen? Hoe zeg je dat? Stars and the
Bodies.
Thank you, astral bodies in the Bible, for example. And then we talked about that. So really interesting. They opened up my world, and I think a little bit their world as well. And so we moved towards one another. We even though our worlds couldn't be further apart. And I thought this process very inspiring. Also, it opened up doors where at the start you noticed, they're really a bit jumpy and afraid. At some point they were, super generous. Doors opened. Artists got access to their collections. I had meetings with the sisters at 9 o'clock in the evening, which I thought was really trendy. And we were allowed to show artworks on sort of holy spaces that were holy to them. So I was really, I really had a super warm feeling, and the artists were very well welcomed, and the exhibition was really well received. So this inspired me, this exhibition, even though it was super intense. I have to admit, it costs you a lot of time, and it's also intense. But what you can gain from it is, often people say art can bring people together. That can be really a cliche, but here I experienced it to be true. I thought, wow, it's really true. And so I thought, next exhibition that I might do, I also might like to try to work in a sort of similar way to, include people, to discuss with people together and to develop it together to some extent.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that additional detail. And so now obviously we know we have 2 monastery settings on the panel. What's been interesting, I hope that you've picked up on, is of course we're thinking here about the different ways in which we might have peers actually, and where peers relate to learning. So what we heard from Edward, of course, is actually in the process of developing one's art practice, who are your peers and how are you fostered in engaging with your peers in a supportive way. From Esther, we heard a little bit around like how working with your peers can enable you to create structural conditions to make art or to access studios. And then from Nanda around like what it might mean to imagine or relate to the people that you're working, whose place you're working in, or the people whose work you're working with. If you are to engage with them as peers, what else becomes possible? Or how else you might be able to create maybe more meaningful or impactful exhibitions by relating to those settings as sincere settings of eye-level peer making. I wonder actually from a time angle whether we launch straight into audience questions though, because I know we had a lively start already. Are there any questions from the audience around around things that you've heard from the panel, or around this question of peer-to-peer, or the ways in which art relates to learning? Not quite warmed up yet. I wonder then if we can maybe come back to what I was just talking about around like these different levels of peer-to-peer. Is that something that you think about intentionally in your work? So Nanda, we've just heard maybe that you might be thinking about it more intentionally. Esther and Edward, is that something you're considering? I mean, particularly with the Wilde Weten, I can imagine there's been a lot of how do we work together? What does it mean to work together? And I imagine at the art school, there's also the kind of question of like, within pedagogies, radical or not, what is the power dynamic or what is the relationship that you can have?
Like the question, how do you work together is what I said before. It for me the most important thing that whole time is in my mind is that like it's redefining, because when the structure is all the time different, and I think that makes it also very vibrant in a way to collaborate, but also it makes it sometimes as a group difficult also to announce that because you are with 17 people and 17 different meanings, but also 17 different agendas in a way. But also it really helps to also think to meet and especially in a way sometimes we are kind of meeting again. You have that feeling sometimes a little bit in this. But to be honest, if I'm thinking about those moments, I always feel also very happy in a way after, because it's also a way of meeting each other and learning from each other, seeing different perspectives of things. Especially, I was just saying that we had 2 days ago, we had a meeting with big things on the agenda. How will we continue? Will we? What will happen with the project space? Should we not rent it out as a studio because it will make is it a burden? Does it cost too much energy? And then I went in the discussion with a completely different opinion than that when I came out of it. And so I think it's also in a way very nice, and also it will help you in your. Let's talk about myself. Like it will help myself having those conversations with other artists with different opinions, different background, different ideas. It helps also in my practice as an artist to have talks when it goes about an exhibition or something. So it's also kind of trials. I have to say it. No, I don't know if it's clear what I meant, but it's our safe place as well to share things and then learn from that ourselves as an artist, but how you step into the big world, and especially I think for us it is nice that. Here is if I walk around here, it's interesting to see that those studios are kind of very open. You have lots of glass, especially this. I don't know if that's everywhere, but there you can directly see what people are doing and making. And Wilde Weten is kind of very closed. So sometimes you come in and you have the idea that nobody's there. And then at a sudden you hear someone or you hear cracking because all the floors are cracking of this old monastery. So there's people around. But it is very nice that sometimes we have open studios and then everything is going open. But you can always knock on someone's door or you see someone in the hallway. But I think that for many artists it's also nice to have your own safe space that's behind closed doors. But it's also helpful that once in a while, you open up and you show your world, you share your world.
Yeah, I think from an educational perspective, it is the value in let's say forming a peer community or being able to work together as peers are of course. In the shared learning from each other, but also kind of operationally to be able to speak outside of that to other groups, organizations. So, for example, last year some students organized It was an initiative called 𝑡𝑎𝑙𝑘, which was about learning with various forms of neurodiverse learning and their experience of an educational space from that perspective. And that and in these moments where there is a shared agenda and a shared then by coming together you can speak with a stronger voice and you can reach more than you could otherwise. And I think this is the real value for artists and young artists coming together, either as students or as young graduates, being able to come together from a perspective of either a shared lobby for something or having a voice to be able to speak together to do things that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. Having said that, I think that it's important to also understand that that is one part of a wider ecosystem, and you cannot only exist within one ecosystem as an artist. It's simply, you need to be able to move between these things. So what I also see in a rural context, and now I'm speaking more as an artist working in Drenthe, there are initiatives to come together and share that experience of being able to be an artist living in a rural context, which is about a group of peers coming together with a shared agenda, shared lobby, let's say. But I also see very much the limitations on that, because it doesn't. In some circumstances, it can be a really useful tool to speak, but in others, it can become something that is more just kind of nice between yourselves without really having a kind of an agency.
Yeah, so a slight provocation there, right? Of like, what is the value of peer-to-peer? Does it need to have a driver, perhaps? Or when does it need to be enclosed in a sort of safe or playing way, which sounded, Esther, a little bit like what you were describing your relationship to het Wilde Weten as being? Like, there is the capacity to withdraw or to be within it, whilst at the same time, when does it need to actually push further or not just be a kind of just gathering, for instance? I'm trying to find the connection point, but I'm looking around the audience to see if there's any questions from you. No? Okay.
In the meantime, I can say something, Eddie.
Thank you.
So I recognize what you say. Sometimes just only confirming what you all are already thinking. And sometimes I like to speak with someone who's working in the field of theatre, for example, or in film, in a different medium, not in the art world. And sometimes you do it like that. Interesting. Or you hear that totally different issues are at hand than in your world. It's mostly, not mostly, but it's also there that you get create ideas that think, that's clever. How could I toepassen?
Apply.
How can I apply this to my own career? This is, and also sometimes I value people who stay under the radar. So we always learned you should inform yourself, visit exhibitions, see everything. But there's also a value in not doing anything and develop your own ideas. I don't know who it was. There was some famous poet who never got out of his house. But I can also understand that. And now at the moment, I'm a bit like the oyster. I don't see many exhibitions now, apart from this week. But I'm now through a period that, I've seen so much the last 10 years that I feel like I prefer now to be in nature. And the ideas, they are always there. And even though, contrary to that, I do experience that really talking to artists, seeing artworks, that gives me ideas. It's like, I think as a curator, you're also sort of a collector of ideas. And this is how, just by being in the art world, you bump into ideas and that you can further develop.
And what are you currently developing?
Yeah, it's secret.
So I guess what we're hearing, of course.
A big difference in the approach of the life of artists in France or in France. What do you think?
Approach in terms of what? Approach to what?
When you are an artist, is it different being that, I don't know, the audience feels that maybe you are in France or you are in Holland, so being an artist.
So is the role or like the sort of social way in which you are an artist different in France or in the Netherlands? Maybe Nanda, you know a little bit because of your
We're not going off topic here.
We're following the stream.
Well, in terms of connected to the previous discussion, how to make a living as an artist.
I guess I'm understanding it perhaps as being like who is in your social setting or how are you socially shaped as an artist, and that might be different in these cultural contexts. Because it is true that right now we're speaking on the panel quite a lot about actually the Dutch context, right? Like what are the kind of educational premises of becoming an artist here, and what are the real conditions of setting up somewhere, what we need here in the city for studios. And so perhaps the question is kind of asking us to zoom out a little bit and think about whether that peer-to-peer has a different relationship in France.
Thanks, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, difficult. It's differently organized in France. For once, the art market is much more present. So as an artist, you have much more to deal with that. In the Netherlands, there's much more space for experimenting. I think that's really an advantage. In France, you straight away you have to get your gallery, earn your money. Some people work for big brands like the Chanel, or to do the window dressing or the défilé, the catwalks. So the question of money is much more prevalent in France. So that I would say is a bit negative. On the other hand, I think artists from France who studied in France, they're very eloquent. They can really well explain their practice. They're very theoretically well developed. That I think, wow, I really am. Also the curators, they speak really well. So that's a difference. But from the peer-to-peer point of view, I think this also does create some, that the idea of
Collegiality.
Now that word, that it's in the Netherlands much easier because the money part is a bit less present, and in France you're much more of a concurrent, competitor than you are here. Also for curators here in the Netherlands, as a curator, I have colleagues. In France, I have competitors. When I first came there, I thought, whoa, what's this? So I really didn't have any friends from my age and my gender, because they saw me as, or I wanted to steal their boyfriend or their job. I was really, it made me a bit sad. I thought, why should it be like this? So I hardly, as a curator, exchange ideas with French colleagues. With artists, yes. With French artists based in France, yes. But a bit less to, curators.
Interesting. So now we're touching on other ecosystems. I wonder, Esther or Edward, whether there's anything, because of course both of you do work also internationally or have international artists and students come, whether there are reflections you have. Like, do you think that the peer-to-peer that you've been reflecting on is specific to the Dutch context?
It's very different in a rural context or an urban context. This is a kind of fundamental difference. I mean, here in Rotterdam, there are many buildings. That I think I heard there's 100 artists working in this building, and that creates a lot. That's a lot of artists in a very dense environment. In Drenthe, there are maybe 100 artists working over the whole province, if that. So it's it creates a different it's a different relationship. You have to drive to go and see the other artists. They're an hour away. So there are people have like last night I was at an opening of someone's studio. She just moved into a new studio, so she invited all the artists she knows over, and we went and we saw her new studio, which is very nice. And things like that also happen, of course, in Rotterdam. But there's a less because it's just not such a density. You have to travel kind of far to go places. That means that there's more there's less of a kind of an over. There's less of a what I found. I lived in Rotterdam for many years, and there's a sort of saturation point as well that you reach when there's just so much going on. And of course, you reach it very fast on a week like this where there's hundreds of things going on. And in the countryside, there isn't that saturation. There isn't that kind of competition. And what's interesting is there's also a very different relationship with the audience. People sit and watch videos. So they'll come to an exhibition that we put on, and you'll have a video that's like 40 minutes long, and the audience will sit and watch it. I've never seen anyone do that in Rotterdam. So it's a very different. There's a very different relationship to art, but also to making. So many of the artists working in Drenthe are older because there's less support for young artists. In fact, there's almost no support for young artists because it's a poor province and there's no real support structure for that. So there's no art academy in Drenthe, for example. So anybody wanting to study there has to move out of the province. And then there's an emphasis, if you want to be an artist, you need to go to the city because that's where the exhibitions are. That's where the galleries are. That's where the museums are. It's well, we can discuss later whether that's true or not, but there is a draw for that. And so the artists that live in the province where I live, generally speaking, are older, and have, some of them are already retired, or they work. A lot of them work in education, let's say in the arts. They work in schools, so they have side jobs to maintain their practice, like most of the artists that also live in Rotterdam have. It's just those side jobs are not working in a cafe, might be working in a school, which is just, so it's a different kind of it's a different economy, and it has its own struggles. And the struggle there is how do you step out of that to get any visibility for your practice. So there's a strong kind of glue, let's say. So there are a lot of exhibitions and presentations that happen for that community within the region, but stepping beyond that and being able to show your work outside of that is very, very hard.
Yeah, what I always find very interesting about our residency guests is that, of course, it's also depends on the personality, but also the culture sometimes. So we make a dinner, and then the artists can either cook themselves, but they don't have. We can do that, but it's so interesting to see where they come from, because at some cultures they really feel like, no, I want to cook because I'm here, and they share their culture with us, and that's why it's so, for us, also important. And also you can feel that sometimes in the building that there is a different guest artist that brings a different vibe, and then as well, that's again personality. But I know from those 20 years that sometimes there were like summers that almost all of us were in the backyard having a barbecue, because then the guest artist was so kind of nice and brought so much atmosphere and was kind of also caring for us. And then you get this reciprocal feeling, so there is a difference of culture very much, I think. And also, what Edward is also saying, like, we are very small, so if you compare our community with here, for example, that's already very different. And then you are in one city, Also, in Rotterdam, it's always said the south and over the river is also different. And I think that is everywhere worldwide. So if you come to, I've done myself lots of residencies, and all of them are different, but it's depending so much about the structure. But mostly what I really liked about doing it is that it's a different thing than just that you go somewhere on a journey and meeting people, because somehow if you do a residency, you step inside of a network. It can be small, can be big, but that's always, I think, very helpful. And somehow I sometimes feel that as a Wilde Weten, I think I feel that personal, but I think more of us, if we have guest artists, we would like to give them more, but that means we have to give them more of ourselves, and that is not always possible, because we also have our own practice. But this sharing, and especially the culture and backgrounds, it's very good, helpful. Yeah.
I think we'll bring it to a close there. Thank you to our panelists.